In this video we're gonna use this Fujifilm GFX 50S Mark II for macro photography. This video is sponsored by mpb.com. This is a pretty old sensor by now. I think it's actually the same sensor as in Fuji's very first medium format camera, but it's still a good sensor. Small snail. Usually they aren't that pretty as macro photography subjects, but if they are sitting in a pretty flower, it can work. Excuse me for all these airplanes. They come about every 3 minutes or so, so they will be in this video a lot, even though I try to avoid them. When I researched what macro lens to get for this system, I of course soon discovered that Fujifilm have their own 120mm macro lens, but I also soon discovered that that one only has 0.5 times magnification, which is not a lot, especially not on medium format. And it's not enough to photograph insects unless you want to crop a lot. But I discovered that Fujifilm provide their own extension tubes, so extension tubes should work with their lenses. Fujifilm's extension tubes are very expensive, but I found this one from Viltrox. This is a 45mm extension tube from Viltrox, and it's made to mimic Fujifilm's own very expensive 45mm extension tube. And I have to say that the build quality and feel of this Viltrox extension tube is really good. It really feels premium, high quality, so I'm really happy with it. And we're gonna talk more about why I picked this lens to put on the extension tube in a moment. We have an interesting spider here. Let's see if we can capture it. Oh, it's a crab spider. And you know what they do? They always go to the underside of the flower. Okay, I think I got a decent shot. Some incredible views here today, with the mist under the bridge and the Jesus statue. Last summer I had collected a lot of camera gear over the years, a lot of lenses and cameras that I wanted to get rid of somehow, preferably sell. But it's so much hassle to sell items on like a Craigslist-like site. You have to photograph the item, you have to write a text about it, you have to try to come up with a reasonable price, and then when you put up the ad you have to deal with all these hagglers that like, so much pain. And then you have to book a time to meet someone and they will not show up, they will often be late, and it's just so much hassle to sell something. And I had all these items, I don't have time for this. But then someone told me about this site, mpb.com, where you can just pick all your items in a list. It goes in like 1 minute, and they immediately will tell you how much you will get paid for them. And they pay surprisingly well, I would have to say. Really reasonable amounts of money for your gear, so you will get pretty much as if you would sell them yourself. And then you just pack all the gear into one big box, or several boxes if they don't fit one box, and then they will send you like a packing slip that you can just print out, and then someone will pick up the package the very next day. And then a few days later, when they have checked the items, you will get paid for them. And it's such a smooth, nice experience if you want to get rid of a lot of camera gear or just one piece of camera gear. So yeah, that immediately made me fall in love with mpb.com. Anyways, back to the GFX. How did I pick the lens? This is the 30mm f3.5 lens, which is like one of their sharpest lenses and optimized for 100 megapixels, even though this camera only has 50 megapixels. And I picked this lens simply because I saw a table that Fujifilm has released with all the different magnifications you could get with different extension tube and lens combinations, and naturally I went for the highest one, and with this lens you will get 1.6 times magnification with the 30mm lens, and that is all these airplanes all the time. That is the most magnification you can actually get with a regular extension tube approved by Fujifilm and one of their lenses. Yeah, this setup is pretty chunky. It definitely weighs a lot and you can feel the weight around your neck. But when I'm actually shooting with it, it doesn't feel that heavy because the grip is very, very good. But if I were to describe this camera in one sentence, it's basically a Fujifilm X-T4 or X-T5, but a lot bigger and heavier. The camera feels exactly the same in other ways. But the viewfinder, I would say, is exceptional. So MPB is a marketplace. They not only buy cameras and lenses from you, they sell them to you as well. This kit I got from MPB, the lens and the camera. I got to borrow it this time, but if I would buy a medium format camera, mpb.com is definitely the place I would go, because I think this is one of the best examples of a camera and a lens that you should buy used. They are so expensive new, you get them a lot cheaper if you buy them used, and in most cases gear like this haven't been used that much when people sell them to MPB. And MPB classifies everything in different categories of how good condition they are. The settings I use are f8 in aperture, ISO 200, and a shutter speed of 1/200th of a second. The reason I use f8 is that I find that to be a good aperture at 1.6 times magnification. I get quite a lot of depth of field, but I don't get any diffraction, or not too much at least. As you can see, the working distance is not much, it's like 1 or 2 centimeters, but I find it enough. I find it enough. One macro photography thing that the Fujifilm cameras do really well is focus peaking. I always find it very easy to set the focus right just using the peaking, and it works every time. Almost, at least. Now let's go back to the studio for my analysis of the photos and also my conclusions about Fuji GFX as a macro photography system. The photos are nice, I think. I was a bit unlucky this day because there weren't a lot of insects out, so I had trouble finding insects. And also I kind of got the feeling that the insects are a little bit extra scared when the camera is this big. Not scientific, but it kind of felt like that they were a little bit more skittish than usual. The camera was enjoyable to use. I really liked the grip and everything, and maybe I would like this for like regular photography, like landscape or portraits or stuff, but for macro photography, I mean, to be honest, this camera is a lot bigger and heavier than other cameras you could use for macro photography, and I do not feel that the extra step up in sensor size really adds that much. Yeah, you get more megapixels, you get slightly larger sensor, but to me that doesn't make a big difference. And also the files are pretty heavy to work with in Lightroom, I noticed. So while I would be able to recommend this camera if you really feel like buying a medium format camera, I would maybe not recommend it for macro photography. And on top of that, my choice in lens wasn't the perfect one, I realized. First of all, I forgot to add some kind of velvet inside the extension tube, so I got a bit of reflections there, which hurt my contrast. You can see that in some of the photos. But also the working distance became extremely short, and that didn't help with the light. What I would do next time I would take a medium format camera for macro photography would be to see what macro lenses, for example from Laowa, that would be possible to adapt to GFX with an adapter and still get the full image circle, because that would probably be a much better choice, and I would have a more compact, smaller lens and more flexibility in terms of magnification. But I'm so thankful for this opportunity to finally try a medium format digital camera. I have never been able to try one before, so it was really nice to do that. Now I know how it feels to use one. Not that much of a difference from a regular full frame camera, to be honest. But it's nice to finally do it, to finally try it, and I have checked that off my bucket list. And thank you so much mpb.com for sponsoring this video and for enabling me to try this camera.